think I might be live. Tell me if you can hear me. It's saying that I'm live, but I'm actually not sure. Okay, cool. So I actually have it. I have it on my phone, so I'm double checking in two places. I already got some questions, so I just wanted to jump in. Thank you so much for the questions, Ronaldo. Is that how you pronounce your name? Ronaldo Rex. Ronaldo Rex asks pros and cons of Django over Flask and Tornado. Which should I opt for either, and why should that be the case? Well, like any framework or any library that's built by somebody else, in the case of Django, Flask, or a lot of open source projects, a lot of them have pros and cons all the time anyway, right? So they're all there. All three of those that you mentioned are there to solve very similar problems. I haven't used Tornado or Flask that much. I've used Django a ton. And I will say that Django itself has a very, very strong community around the world. That's not necessarily not true for Flask and Tornado, but Django itself is really big, where Flask is more narrow, it's smaller, so you can actually build things probably a lot quicker. And I've actually heard that a lot of people are using Flask more often for microservices in conjunction with Django. So you're using Django 2 as your main core web application, but they're using Flask for microservices. In Tornado, I'm still researching a lot about it, so I don't have enough to give back on that one specifically, so I won't ask that now. Maybe in the future, but it is something that I definitely want to look a lot more into. So let's see, your next question. What are your thoughts on the current front-end JS ecosystem and their intense number of frameworks? Yeah, this is a good question. So, Ronaldo, I would say that JavaScript overall has a lot of frameworks that have a lot of really good value. And I was just watching a talk with the founder of Django. I'm going blank on his name right now, but he was talking about this specific issue, and I think he actually covers it really well. So if you search Django founder talk, he's no longer part of the core team or the core development team, but he was one of the guys who originally made it for the news site he was working on in Kansas, I believe it was. And this was like 10 years ago probably. He talked about it in the sense that, you know, this is becoming a problem, like when we abstract things and we're trying to solve for so many edge cases and then we make frameworks out of it. And this is probably true for Django and Flask as well, where they start to solve problems for just very edge case scenarios. And then this framework gets huge and sort of convoluted and just too much stuff, right? So what I would actually hope that happens if you are really serious about building a front-end framework or a front-end anything using JavaScript, I'd really hope that you learn some plain, pure JavaScript first to get a really good handle of that. And then I like using jQuery because it's tried and true. I also like Angular, and I've heard great things about React. I haven't done enough with React yet to give a really solid comment on it. And there will be more. But the thing is, with Angular and React, both themselves have been released by big companies, and they have an incentive for those things doing really well. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good for everybody or all the developers. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it's not. There's been some backlash against React itself because of what's happening with Facebook and a lot of these data leaks and all that. So that's where I'm a little hesitant to say like that these JavaScript frameworks are the end-all be-all, because they're not. We've seen a lot of them come out in the last few years, and there's going to be more that come out in the future. Like Vue.js is another one that to me just sort of popped out of nowhere, and it's now one of those popular things that I get asked about a lot. See, what I think is what would be better is to just realize that if you're learning right now, you should stick with one language, be it JavaScript, be it Python. I think Python's a really good beginner's language. Stick with one of those things for as long as you possibly can and really get good at it. Build full-on projects either from scratch or using third-party software or third-party frameworks, and do that as much as possible until you actually have a really solid grasp of it where you feel confident that you could go forward and build that thing yourself. For example, I know Python pretty well now. I've been doing it for a little over 8 years, and I know it to the point where I feel very confident that I could probably build anything that's written in Python. Now, could I do it in a short amount of time? Not necessarily. Like, could I actually rebuild something exactly like Django if Django didn't exist? There's probably no way that I'd be able to do that in a reasonable amount of time. It might take me 4 or 5 years to get to the point where it's something even close to what Django is today, but by that time it's going to be far beyond, and that's because there's a big group of people working on it. But I would say my skills themselves, I know that I know enough that I could work through all of the problems and research and do all the things that need to be done to build these things from scratch, so then I have a greater appreciation for things like Django, or even the same is true with JavaScript libraries. I don't know JavaScript nearly as well as I know Python, but I know enough of JavaScript where I see things like TypeScript or Angular or jQuery, and I can realize that value on a huge level because I know that core base of things. Hopefully that answers your questions. I'm not positive if it does. I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think it's really important for us to take the time to learn at a base level one of these programming languages and get really, really good at it. Because there's still so many use cases that haven't been explored for these various languages, right? So that's something I would encourage you. Okay, so let's go to that next question. Gaza Imp asks, do you think that Firebase has any advantage over Postgres for Django? Yeah, speed, right? So like Firebase, you can just have a backend done like that, right? But I think with that speed comes at the cost of potential flexibility that Django has, right? So we can build all sorts of things using Django for the backend, for backend processing, and also interacting with other services, and doing that through Python, where doing it with Firebase, you can still do a lot of those things, but I personally think it's really nice to have that control over that backend completely and pick the services I want to use on that backend, which I believe also include Firebase. I think you can actually integrate Django's service with Firebase's services too, which is another one of those sort of advantages. I don't actually use Firebase that much, so I sorry if that's not the greatest answer, but that's at least my understanding now. Perhaps it's something I need to know more of. Perhaps I need to learn more of it. If you have any resources on something you've seen in relation to this topic, or any topic for that matter, let me know in the comments below. I would definitely love to check out more things about that, because part of the reason I'm doing these question and answers is I realize that there's not only can I help answer questions for you, but the questions that you get help me learn. I have to go and research and get better at these things. And it was one of these things as to why I think so many more people should teach other people how to code, is because it makes you so much better. Ever since I started training people how to code, I got phenomenally better, because the questions that come up, I don't think about all the time, right? Or I don't even, my projects, the things that I do, like they just might not come up. So the fact that you guys are asking these questions will help me get better. And that's another reason why I have to do these more often. So I'm saying this on camera so you guys bug me if I haven't done it in a long time, because I really want to do these more often. Even if it's for 5 of you guys, I want to help you guys to some degree, because I'll get some of these random questions that are just awesome. And I want to think about these things more, because as a community, all of us learn how to code and building software and stuff like that. It's better for us to support each other along the way, and I'm hoping to do that with these. Anyways, okay. Thanks for the questions, guys. I really, really appreciate it. Ronaldo, thank you a lot for your efforts. Love the quality of your works and your dedication. Thanks so much, man. I very much appreciate it. Much love and much appreciation for the questions and the comments. Hopefully you have some more. Looks like you might. Okay, so I'll try and lift my phone up a little bit so I'm not staring straight down. Okay, so I can't pronounce your full name, but I'll say Shashish Akar? No, that's probably not right. I'm sorry that I butchered your name. You learned Django from me from my Try Django series. Thank you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I put these things out for you to learn. And it's always great to hear from you guys when you actually learn how to use Django from something that I've done, which is awesome. I mean, I'm just such a huge fan of Django. And as you might be able to tell just from listening to me, but also the projects I've done, I've been working in Django for a while now. And it's really that first framework that really sunk in with me that I could actually build something real. And that's why I've been just such a big fan of it for so long. And I'm sure there are other frameworks out there. I know there are other frameworks out there that are probably really good. But just Django's just been growing and growing and growing. And I love being a part of that. Let's see. Ronaldo, you got another question. Is this a general Q&A or Django specific? Ask any question. I'm here to answer questions to help you get your projects going. So whether it's related to entrepreneurship, whether it's related to Django or other software, if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you. I have a lot of opinions, so like I'll happy to give those opinions for the most part. Unless I just absolutely know nothing about it, then I'll just tell you that. So ask away. That's the goal here. And for those of you guys who don't know me, which is probably a lot of you, my name's Justin Mitchell. I run Coding for Entrepreneurs, the website, as well as the YouTube channel, but I have a lot of interest, as I hope you do as well. I'm sure you do, right? Like you're probably not just interested in code. And I think that's really important so you can foster, new ideas of things that could be automated through code, whether it's through Django, Python, JavaScript, Swift, anything, Java. I mean, the thing here is that something I've been thinking a lot about is there is 7,480 million people that do not know how to code. That's roughly 7.5 billion people. I mean, most of the world does not know how to code. And that means that only a small percentage of the people, a very, very small percentage of the people, are making software for all of us. And I think that's a big opportunity for those of you who want to actually learn how to code. You can start building software, even if it's for 50 people, to help automate something for them. That, to me, that's magical. And that's something that we should be doing a lot more of, because to me, code and software is a reflection of our ideas, and our ideas in action. Where a book is a static idea that could cause action, code is action, or their ideas in action. So something that's really cool. So I really like that. So ask away, ask those questions away. Thanks a lot, Ronaldo. I appreciate the questions. So Adit, you asked if I'll do a series about decentralized applications. Yeah, eventually. I have to learn a lot more of it first. I know some of the core concepts of it, but I think there's a few different channels online that already cover it using Python that I'm watching myself to try and figure out the best way to go about doing it, because it is so much different than everything I've done to this point. And I think that's important. It's important to do things that are completely different, because it might shift everything that I do in general. I think deep learning is another example of this. It might shift everything. I mean, if there comes out a software tomorrow that completely writes all of the code that I ever need to write just by me saying, hey, I need this done, and it goes and does it and writes hundreds or thousands of lines of code with tests and all that stuff, I would use that right away, and I would want to show all of you how to use it right away too, so we can just build that many more things just because of what I got done saying. Okay, so Dima, the best practices in Python and Django. This is a long discussion that can go on for hours that I'm just not going to touch that much of it right now. What I will say is we want to stick to some of the core things with web development. Number one, don't repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself. Dry, right? Dry. You want to stay dry. You don't want to repeat yourself really through your projects. I say that knowing that if you've taken any of my courses or multiple of them, you'll know that I repeat a lot of the same concepts in those courses. Now, that is about teaching, that's about asking questions, and then about seeing something different. But when it comes to actually building your own stuff, you want to think in terms of not repeating yourself and systematizing things as much as possible and making things automated as much as possible, so you can have better running software. The other thing is you want to break things. You want to try new things to make it as clean as possible I realize these things are super general, but you want to clean things as much as possible. So that means that reading other people's code, especially really, really popular libraries like Django or Python requests or Flask, you can learn a lot about how you should write your own code by looking at what they've done to solve any given project or any given problem, any given problem that happens. Like definitely do that if you haven't already. And that's another advantage of watching somebody who's showing you how to code, watching them actually do things. You can look at their GitHub repo if they have one, like mine. You can take a look at that and get some new ideas on how to code too. And the other thing is you can actually see the progression and how I've improved how to code also on my GitHub, right? You can look at my super old projects and you can compare them to the new ones of today. And they are actually a lot different. They've improved. They've improved over time based off of questions I get from you guys and also my own learning, because frankly, I don't stop. I want to keep learning. I think there's still so much to be understood, right? Like asynchronous programming with Django and Python is really exciting to me. And that's something else we can talk about if you guys want to know more about it. Okay. So if you have more specific questions about best practices, let me know. That was a general answer, but thanks for the question. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the questions. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Okay, so the next thing is, can you please put out a video on a full large-scale project like using AWS, Django Redis, nginx? Thanks for the great content. Thank you for the question, Keshav, I believe that's your name. Thanks so much for the question. I actually do cover how to do this on joincfe.com. I cover how to use Elastic Beanstalk, which is on AWS. Heroku itself is on AWS as well. And I also cover Redis and nginx on there too. So I'm assuming you're asking for me to put it on YouTube. If the rest of you want that on YouTube, please give a thumbs up to that comment if you can. I'm not sure if you can. Or just comment below after this video ends or whatever. Okay, cool. So thanks for the suggestion. Really appreciate it. There is a lot of stuff out there on Django and Redis. And I believe even joincfe.com/blog, you can find Django and Redis related stuff right on there. And if you look at our Celery project, I believe that one's on there as well. That will show you how to implement Redis, because Redis itself, you can just use Celery to manage it. And there's some other things too, but it's a pretty cool little technology. Okay, so what is the best Django project structure? Why do too many people keep production static files outside the project? Super substitute. Sorry, you don't speak English. Your English is pretty good, super substitute, and thanks for the question. So what's the best Django project structure? If you go to joincfe.com/GitHub and look at all of my Django projects and that structure, that is the structure I really like to use. Mainly because I think it's really clean and it goes off of what is sort of built in with Django. So like when you run Django admin or Python manage.py start project or start app, like I kind of follow that structure. I think they even have a best practices on the docs. They probably do. So I tend to follow that in general as far as structuring my project. Now, is it the best? Well, to me, it's the most simple. So therefore, I think it's the best for that reason. But a lot of times projects start to get really big and you want to break it apart. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you document it and you make it really easy for any Django developer to jump in and make changes. And that is something that I would recommend that you do. And again, going back to what I've said before, just check into what other people have done. Read their projects and see how they structure their Django projects on GitHub, because there's a lot out there, and I think you can really learn a lot from what other people do, and then you can make your own assumption about what best practices are, because honestly, there's no like one right answer for software ever, right? So best practices, I would almost argue it should be called better practices, right? Because there's no like finished best, right? Because what's best today might not be the best tomorrow. Okay, so why do so many people keep production status files outside a project? So I think what you're referring to is why do you keep JavaScript, CSS, images, all that stuff outside of your Django production code. A big reason for this is because, number one, you want to have some sort of static file server to handle those things. So if you ever made just a blank index.html website, so no backend service at all, that is a static project, right? And that is a static server. There's servers that are set up specifically to handle those kinds of things. And there's also servers set up specifically to handle stuff like Django. Now you want to separate those things out so that when other people access these static images, it's going off of one location, and the cache stuff can work a lot better for that. That's one reason. So you can use something like a CDN is what I'm getting at, content delivery network. So once you take them out of Django, they can live on a static server and a CDN, which means that they can be delivered throughout the world a lot faster, right? So they're not coming from wherever that Django project is. They might be coming from a local server, and having those static files near them using this CDN means that your project's going to load a lot faster. The other side of it is what Django developers say is it's probably insecure to have Django load and serve your static files. That's what they say in the documentation, and they've said that for years. And that's probably true. I'm gonna take their word for it. So that's why you'd probably want to separate your static files like images, CSS, and JavaScript in another environment and have that environment actually load and run it. Good question. I do like that one. It's something that comes up from time to time in my projects. That's why in Try Django, I try to explain it there, and perhaps it's easier to understand it once you actually put it into action. And also once you have users around the world using your project, it helps. It definitely helps the loading speed. Okay, so I really don't know how to pronounce this name. Yeah, so C backwards and para, C and para. Could you, like, if you guys have a name that how do I put this? Like that you think that I might not know how to pronounce, could you put like a way to pronounce it? Maybe, I don't know. I'll try to pronounce it, but I want to actually get your name right. And the more I see the way you pronounce it, the better I can actually give at least somewhat of an accurate pronunciation, because I want to pronounce it right, just like I would hope that people would pronounce my name right. Even though my name's a very white person name, Justin is, it's fairly known probably because of that singer guy. Okay. Thank you if you do that. If not, no worries. I'll still try and pronounce your name. So Superna, hello. Thank you for your works. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to share. You work with Django and Python 3. Can you tell us how to become a middleware developer and what is the difference between middle and junior? So when you say middleware developer, I think you're referring to like a mid-level developer, because middleware is something that Django uses as well. So I'm guessing you're saying a mid-level developer. What's between mid-level and junior? So junior is somebody that's going to need their code checked fairly often, right? You're going to want to make sure that they're doing what they're doing is right. So middle would have to have that happen a lot less, and more likely will be able to check somebody else's code and figure out how to improve it. So I don't think there's a hard, fast rule for either one, to be honest with you, because if you're at a really high level organization that just expects a lot of you, you might be, a senior developer at another firm and still be considered junior at a different one. So I think that varies from job to job. So I would actually ask those people, the people that do that. I don't do that. I'm not in that arena, so I'm not looking to be like, oh, I'm junior, middle, or senior. I adopt the philosophy of like, there's always learning. No matter how good you are, there's still a lot of things that you can learn and pick up. It's probably not the best answer for you. I would say also, not just being dedicated to learning, but talk to the people that are middle and junior developers and get a sense from them directly. Like even if it's 4 of them, that would probably be a good sort of tweet or email to get answers from, especially if you're trying to become a middle-level developer itself. But I think just learning as much as possible and being the best that you can be and comparing what you've done today with what you've done in the past. I would also say a junior developer is probably going to have to reference documentation a lot more, have to Google things a lot more. A mid-level one will probably know these things off the top of their head, like I do. I mean, I know things off the top of my head, but could I run the core Django development team? Probably not. Maybe eventually, hopefully eventually, maybe. I don't know. I'm super interested in software, but like getting to the level of what some of these senior developers do is just not something that I particularly want to do, because it's a lot of management of other people's code, and I really like doing the work myself. So that's kind of where I'm at. That doesn't mean I don't like collaborating with people. I love collaborating with people. That's why we're talking. But I don't necessarily. I want to work with people that are better than me or on par when I'm actually coding. So then I'm learning from them and not the other way around. And I think if you adopt that mindset, it's going to help you regardless of what technical level you're at in any given organization with pretty much any given field, in my opinion. And then you'll probably just rise up naturally. Okay, well, sorry, huge tangent there. Now, got another question. How do I improve my coding? You do it a lot, fail better, do it again, read other people's code. I've said this a lot. Just rewind a little bit. Maybe watch the beginning of this. That's mode, I suppose. Hey mode. So yeah, just go back earlier in this video to get some sort of idea of what I think you should do. Okay, Mike Nunez, thank you for your work. I learned about Django. I can't live without it right now. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the question. I'm glad you've learned a lot about Django. I have too, and I feel that my life would be more difficult without it. I could definitely live without it, but my life would be more difficult without it. And I very much appreciate everything the Django developers have done. Okay, so Ronaldo, another question. What do you think about NoSQL, DBs, and Django? Any notes on GraphQL we should look forward to? NoSQL, I have zero experience with it, literally none. I know that I probably should get some more experience with it, but I have none. So I'm not the best not the best person to ask for that. And actually, that's true about GraphQL too. Don't really have a lot of experience with it. Doesn't come up a lot. I don't need either one for projects most of the time, so I don't think about them as much as I maybe should. Thanks for the question though, Ronaldo, or all the questions. I really appreciate it. Let's see, where are we? I think I skipped one. Zumo TV, technologies involved in making e-commerce website with Django. Funny you ask. I've been doing e-commerce websites with Django for years and years and years. And I just recently released a huge, probably my most comprehensive course I've ever done on joincv.com/courses on e-commerce itself. So technologies. Now, there's a lot of them. Number one, you're going to want to use HTTPS. You're going to want to have a secure site. That's like probably a fundamental thing for e-commerce now. And with something called Let's Encrypt, it allows you to have free HTTPS certificates. So there's really no reason to not have it now. Literally none. And if you use Heroku and you use their $7 a month tier, you can get it for free on Heroku as well. So it's literally just $7 a month for Heroku for HTTPS. There's other services. I'm sure there's free ones out there that can also do that as well. So that one's a critical component. The next thing is, like, there's a lot of the different things that you can put into Django to make this happen. So if it's Django specific, please let me know. But I'll say that you'll also need a payment processor. So I like using Stripe or Braintree. Both of those things are really easy to integrate, in my opinion. And they're also really easy to maintain, and they also require HTTPS. So you take those three things, Django, HTTPS, Stripe, and Braintree, you can have an e-commerce site. Now, to build everything else, it can take some time. So I like building e-commerce sites from scratch with Django. So not really from scratch, but from scratch with Django, because then you already have a roadmap. We've seen e-commerce sites a lot, like all around the world. Amazon.com and every Shopify site out there. you have a good idea of where you want it to go, like such as building a shopping cart, a search engine, add to cart, blah, blah, blah. Those sorts of things are there. They're already really well known, really well established, so you can absolutely use that as a roadmap. So I think that is how you would be able to make it happen. And of course, my course itself has all the code open source on joincfe.com/GitHub. So you can look at that code too, as well as all of our other e-commerce projects as well. So you can check out the requirements file if you want to see the packages we use other than the 3 things I just mentioned. Woo, okay. I'm just going to have some water here. Man, I can talk. I like this. You guys having fun? Is this useful? Hopefully it is. We'll see. We've been on here for about half an hour now. That's a lot of talking. I mean, so normally, like, if you were in a live event, right? So like I'm doing this live. If I was in front of all of you in a room, I could actually like take a breath when you ask me these questions instead of reading it and then responding right away. It's probably part of the reason I stopped doing it before is because I would get kind of exhausted after. It's more exhausting than recording a session, right? But what I realize is how much I can actually learn from you guys with these great questions on where I might need to go or where you might need to go, and I think that's something else that's important. So I will take breaks from time to time just to make sure that I don't burn myself out on this stuff. And I will say I'm probably going to do this until about 1 p.m. So maybe another half an hour, 30 minutes or so, just to keep that in mind. I might go longer. It looks like I still have a good amount of questions to go. So if the questions stop, I'll definitely stop. But if they don't stop, I'll try and keep getting to them. Okay, so let's go back to it. So Mike Nunez asks another question. By the way, in a multi-services projects, if I have one backend for every service, I will have multiple Django admin login. I don't know how to connect each to each other. Can you make a project showcasing that process? Okay, so if you are creating multiple services for any given project, I think this is actually clever. So let me kind of give an example. Let's say, for instance, you're building two different e-commerce websites that have different requirements. What you're going to want to do is, and then one other thing, each one of them has videos that you have uploaded. You're not going to use YouTube. You're not going to use Vimeo. You're going to have your own solution, right? You're going to use AWS and maybe some of their CloudFront technology with Video.js. Let's say you do that, right? You want to have one service that handles the processing of these videos, right? So you have two e-commerce websites, and then you want to set up this microservice for the video itself. So what I would do is I would create API keys and a REST API specifically. You'd probably do that first, actually. You create a REST API for that video service itself. And that REST API has keys that interact with every service that you want with it. So realistically, what you're going to do is you're probably not going to use the Django admin that much for that video processing service. What you're probably going to do more of is literally create a REST API that interacts with these different projects and then having the necessary permissions built into them. So your other projects, so these two different e-commerce projects, can actually work with it directly. And then if you do enough testing and you do enough setup on that video processing service, you'll probably be able to leave it and not have to touch it that often, assuming you're doing testing and regular testing. And then every once in a while, you might need to do some improvements. But for the most part, once you create an API for your service, you don't have to worry so much about the Django admin as long as that API is really good. So when I mentioned Stripe and Braintree for those e-commerce things, those really are just solid APIs that are services, or you can consider them as microservices for a bigger project, right? They just kind of take out that billing piece and just handle that. So you'd want to do that same thing for every other piece of your project, and just building a REST API. And that way, like, you wouldn't have to build a Django front end. So you'd use the Django REST framework to build that API, or any other API service for Django to build an API So then your new Django projects can just like absolutely integrate with it, no problem. Hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if it doesn't. Thanks for the questions, guys. Wow, there's so many good questions here. So many to get to. Okay. John Gebb, which programming language to start with web programming? Okay, John. So this is a question that like I think is important for most people to hear that are interested in getting into building web applications or doing web programming. There's two schools of thought. One is using just JavaScript and learning JavaScript so you can build things for the web, because JavaScript is so much tied to the web. It's not necessarily tied to other things. There are other things for it, but JavaScript itself is pre-installed on every web browser. Like you can run JavaScript code on pretty much every modern web browser as well as old ones. JavaScript's a little bit challenging to learn though. Like honestly, I think it's partially one of the reasons why we have so many frameworks for JavaScript is because JavaScript itself, or pure JavaScript, is challenging to learn. So you're going to hear that a lot, is to learn JavaScript. Like if you talk to a web developer, someone who's a hardcore web developer, they're going to tell you JavaScript. The next thing that they might tell you, and I'll get to what I think you should learn in a second, but the next thing they might tell you is Ruby on Rails or PHP. Both of those technologies are great for what they've done, and they've been around for a long time, so they've definitely well proven, and they have been very, very popular. But again, I think those two are a little bit more challenging than the one I'll recommend. But before I recommend the one I will, which most of you probably already know what I'm going to recommend, but I will say that whatever you decide, stick with it until you learn it, right? Until you actually master it. So if it's JavaScript, stick with it until you got it. If it's Ruby on Rails, stick with it until you got it, until you can build something with it. PHP, same thing. Now, if you get to a point where you spent a ton of time and you're just exhausted with that language, obviously don't give up on your goal of building web applications. You can switch to a different one, but realize it's like starting from zero. It's like starting from scratch. I mean, in some cases, it's not like that because concepts do overlap for sure, but the syntax and stuff like that might get very complicated. So what I recommend you start with is Python, and then specifically Django. So starting with Python and learning how to do programming first, I think gets you excited, or it got me excited to build better things for the web. So Python is not web specific. It does all sorts of things from AI to launching rockets to controlling IoT devices like a Raspberry Pi. So Python does a lot of stuff. And if you learn Python, it will help you into jumping into Django, which is written in Python. So you have this overlap of those things. Now, there's one more thing that you need to learn with websites in general and web design in general, and that's HTML and CSS. Those aren't actually programming languages. Those are scripting or markup languages. So they are necessary to know, but to me, they're still very, very fundamental. If you want to build web applications, I think you choose Python. But whatever it is that you end up doing, stick with it and ask a bunch of questions, read other people's code, and just do everything you possibly can to build your projects. It does really help to have a project that you want to have happen, like something that you actually really want to build. That will get you over a lot of these hurdles, right? So the reason I know to code now, the reason I know how to build actual web applications in Python and Django and JavaScript as well, and a few other languages, is because when I started, I had a very specific project in mind. There's something I really, really wanted to build, and that got me through not being happy with my progress with JavaScript, not being happy with my progress with PHP, not being happy with my progress in Java or Objective-C or Ruby on Rails, and then finally trying Python and Django and getting to a point where, wow, this was awesome. And I was just like, oh, so much of like where I am to the cleanness of Python. And if you know English, I think Python looks the most like English. It still doesn't look like English, but it looks the most like English out of all the programming languages that are out there. And I would put JavaScript, Swift, jQuery, all TypeScript, put all of those against Python. I think Python is still the closest looking to English. I love that question. Just love it. Okay. Thanks for the question, John. Appreciate it. Shashank Sharma, please make videos on Node.js. Thank you for the suggestion. I really appreciate it. We also take suggestions on joincfe.com/suggest. If you want to go there, you don't have to. I got it. Node.js. Cool. There are a ton of tutorials on Node.js out there. I know there are because it's a very popular thing to use. I like Django. Okay. So, Ahmad Getty, if I have a tech intern meetup at a company, how can I proceed to get a software engineering internship? To clarify, like networking and show them I am awesome. There's so many different ways to actually come up with this answer. Number one is if you're going to go to a networking event, I would recommend that you find out who's putting it on and thank them when you get there. Don't try and hand them something. So let me give you an example. If we just met and I literally pulled out my phone with a credit card reader and said, "Hey, buy my course." How likely are you going to be to buy my course? If you've never heard of me before, this is going to be really, really low. And even if you have, you're going to be like, "Ooh, like really?" You know, like right off the bat. So you don't want to come off like you're just pushing yourself, right? You want to create some sort of pull. And the way you do that, I believe, is by asking a bunch of questions. And it helps to really have a good idea of who you're going to talk to. So whatever event you're going to, asking a bunch of questions and not leading them into, "Oh, really? Well, I do that exactly." So, for example, if you're going to an event and you know what the person does that's putting it on. Let's say, for instance, it's an engineering company and they specialize in Django, and they're a web development freelancing company or outsourced company, and you want to work with them, right? So they're putting on the event and you want to work with them. Well, perhaps you go up to them and talk to them about these things, the questions that are coming up in this conversation. There's a lot of questions in here that you could ask somebody who is a Django expert, and they might want to give you some feedback. You'd be like, "Hey, I'm just trying to learn. I'm trying to get really good at this. And I know this, and this about you guys, and I really want to learn more. I'm just really eager to learn. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions?" I mean, it's hard to say no to that. Some people will, but then that's the question. It's like, do you want to work for somebody or work with somebody who's not willing to give you advice or to help you learn new things? I personally don't. You know, if I went and asked somebody some questions that I thought heavily about and they were willing and able to answer them. I mean, sometimes people aren't, right? If you catch me while I'm like going to the gym or something, I'm not going to want to sit there and talk to you about Django for hours, right? Or even for a few minutes. But in a networking event, I'm probably very likely to chat with you about Django. So the context of when you ask these questions, of course, is important. But if you're at a networking event and you're trying to talk to somebody and get some questions from them and you're not pushy or dominating their time, I think you can really start to learn more about how you can connect with somebody. And perhaps it's not always career related. Perhaps it's something else. Perhaps you go to a networking event, you find out the founder loves rock climbing like I do. And you start talking to them about it. You're like, "Oh, did you see this video from Chris Sharma? Like blah, 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 blah." Like it might make connections in other ways. So looking at it in the sense of like, what am I getting is the wrong way to look at it. You have to think about like, what can I give to this person? Number one, like how can I ask questions that help them feel like, "Oh, wow, like I really enjoy giving advice to this young and upcoming kid." How do you do that, for one, right? Because that does actually feel really good when you do those things as a person that gives advice. A lot of us want to do that. We want to help the next generation come up, regardless of what age you are. So there are some people that are like that, and that does give some sort of satisfaction. There are other people that just aren't like that at all, that don't want to answer questions. Like they just are sick of it. So it might be hard to relate to them in that sense. So you really have to just like probe with other things, and perhaps you just don't make a connection with them. But the worst thing that you can do is being needy whether it's getting questions answered or asking for a job or asking for a date. Neediness is the worst possible thing. Like, oh, I need this. Like, answer my questions so I can get a job, please. Like, no. Like, just if you ever find yourself thinking that you might be needy, take a step back and don't be needy. If you want to know what neediness looks like, go to an open air market and pretend like you're going to buy things at any given place and see the ones who are jumping, trying to get your business, and see the ones who are not. It's a way to figure out what neediness looks like. Like when someone's being needy, I don't mean like in the sense of like they're not having their needs met. I'm meaning in the sense of like they're like desperately looking for something when they're really not actually that desperate. Or even if they are that desperate, they're not necessarily humble about it. And that's the other part. Okay, totally went on a tangent there. Great question, Hamid. Geez, that was a while ago. I gotta catch up to some of these questions. Okay, which framework is best for front-end development, React, Angular, or Vue.js? They're all great. I don't have an answer for you there. I really like Angular because I like TypeScript, but React, Angular, and Vue.js have been phenomenally popular in their own right, each one. And a lot of JavaScript developers are like, oh, you got to learn this now, and you got to do this, you know. Rewind it a little bit and hear about my rant about the founder of Django. If you didn't see that one, you might have. I don't know. Thanks for the question, Potter. Really appreciate it. Potter Harry, huh? Really? Okay. Ishwar Sharma, how to write code that triggers after certain days in Django automatically, like a course of 30 days and expires after completion of 30 days. Well, you can put a timestamp on things, so when somebody tries to access something, much like a published date, you can make it go away. You can also use Celery and Redis to schedule tasks. So Celery is a really good option for that. Celery, you can look up Celery on our blog, joincfe.com/blog, and learn how to implement it for free there. I think even on joincfe.com/YouTube or our YouTube channel has some stuff on Celery too. If anyone else has some feedback on that, please let me know. Ronaldo, do you work on Python apart from the web, like TensorFlow, NLP? What do you think of the future of AI development, and how do you think Python will evolve in this domain? Excuse me. So yes, I work on Python all the time, regardless if it's for the web or not. That video processing thing that I mentioned, I have something like that on my local computers, just to process video for my business. That's one example of it. TensorFlow, NLP, still learning these things. They are actually on the more complicated side, and it takes more disciplines than just programming to get good at those things. So TensorFlow, NLP, Keras, deep learning, machine learning, pandas like scikit-learn, all of those things I've been doing a lot more of because I'm really interested in them, and I want to learn them because that is definitely the future. Now, Python will evolve because of deep learning. I 100% think that. I think all programming languages will. In other words, eventually somebody's going to apply how to actually build software using deep learning. In other words, we will have AIs that code for us. That will happen eventually. Mark my words, without a doubt. Like in one sense, what I'd say is like I would tell the computer program, hey, make me a Django e-commerce web app. And it'll be way better than anything anyone's ever done. Seriously, any person or team. That will absolutely happen. They're already doing it with other areas and other domains, but I think we have so much of a need for it that it will allow us to do all sorts of really cool and interesting things. Like I can't wait for AI to take my job, because it won't be taking my job. It will be offshoring a lot of the things that I already understand really well, and then I can leverage it on a whole nother level and get way better. Right. So, for example, if I had an idea for a project, I could quite literally tell the AI. This is obviously in theory; it's not out yet. I could quite literally tell the AI, "Hey, make this, this, and this," and then it will clarify questions to me, like, "Oh, do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want an API? Do you want a microservice? Do you want to have that offloaded? Blah blah blah." Like all of those things will come up, and I'll be able to tell it, and then it'll write all the code for me and possibly even deploy it and have it out there in the world. I can't wait until that happens so I can try a bunch of new things and also get better at code myself. Right, so like all the AI right now, so if you look at, I think it's DeepMind that's been playing a lot of these games against professional gamers, they show these professional gamers new techniques that they never even thought of before because of how the AI decided to do something, and they got better as a result. I think the same is true for us programmers and entrepreneurs and whatever the heck that you're working on. Okay, so Shashank Sharma, I'm fresher and learned Angular for front end. I'm not sure what you mean by this. What should I learn? So Angular is great for a front end. Just get something done. That's what I think. Like there's going to be a point where you should start producing something and putting it in the world and stop learning, right? So, or not stop learning, excuse me, but stop learning the next framework, right? So if you know Angular and you know Django, you can now build an app for the world. And I think that's what you should do, is you should start building something for, even if it's 10 people, even if it's 2 people, even if it's for your family and you're just trying to do some sort of coordination app. Do those things because you'll learn a lot more about what projects demand once they're live and people are using them, right? Like Coding for Entrepreneurs, I've been able to evolve that website, codingforentrepreneurs.com or joincfe.com. Slight little plug there, but I've been able to evolve that website for years because of the demands of my customers and my users, right? Like it just gets better over time, and that makes me better as a developer, and it makes me research new technologies for things. And I recommend that for you as well. Wow, I'm so far behind in questions. 31 minutes ago is what I'm still answering questions, and we have 15 more minutes. Whew. So I'm gonna have to really go through this. I'm gonna drink a little coffee and try and just rapid fire answer these questions if that's even possible. I'm not sure if it's possible. Thanks so much, you guys. This is awesome. Like I'm having a really good time. I'm definitely gonna do this a lot more. So keep an eye out on YouTube. I love that YouTube you can schedule these events. I don't remember that being possible before, but I'll have to do those in advance so you guys can know. And please let me know. Tweet at me at Justin Mitchell with 1 L, so JustinMitchell, Justin Mitchell, or at JoinCFE. Tweet at me, let me know what good times work for you, and just do hashtag AskCFE. Even if it's 4 of you and you're like, hey, this time was 2 hours too late, please give your time zone, of course, because, I don't know where everyone is. So a good time, hashtag AskCFE. Cool. All right, next question. RV Sam. Thanks for the question, RV. Manuel, excuse me. You guys are asking a lot of questions, so I'm going to go back to Manuel first. Hey, Justin, superfan here, asking what kind of ideas you implement, others or yours. I suppose both. In that case, what were your most successful ideas about? So this is a good question. So like how do you pick an idea? Maybe you're not asking that, but that's what I'm going to answer. How do you pick an idea and how do you implement it? Whether it's for you or for somebody else, right? So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I got this great idea, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think ideas are hypothesis, right? So if you think of the scientific method, your idea is a hypothesis. You're saying, oh, I think this will be really good. So what you need to do is write a list of assumptions about it. Like, oh, I think that people in Southern California are going to buy this for this, and this reason. That's an assumption. I think that they are going to is an assumption. It's literally in there, right? So you need to test that as soon as you can and in some way that you can. Now, us as software developers, we can test it by building a landing page and have all of the magic or the marketing up there already and have a way for them to, you could either literally have them buy it, like literally pay for it and just refund them right away, or you can have them sign up for an email. Now, literally buying it and just refunding them right away is a really good indication of whether or not they're going to buy it, right? Because they actually bought it. Putting their email in, it doesn't always do that, right? So that's a way to test ideas. Now, how do I test ideas? Is I do, it's hard to do. I mean, like I have a ton of ideas that I want to put out there all the time. Sometimes I put them in as just courses. Like I just make a course out of them and that makes them happen, right? So my best idea is also my worst idea. I had an idea out of college. It was to help restaurants find and hire their service staff online. And the goal was to use technology to help automate that process. I didn't know how to code then, right? So this was a little over 8 years ago. I didn't know how to code then, and I found a technical guy that helped me. We put these things together. Long story short, it ended up falling apart, and the reason it was the best project that I ever did is because it convinced me to code. I believed so much in that idea that I stuck with it to actually code it myself. And this was a lot of time that I put into this thing that didn't end up working out. And a big part of that reason is because I didn't test it from the get-go with the right things. So you definitely want to test if customers are even there. So I implement as many of my own ideas as possible. I'd say to date, codingforentrepreneurs.com is my best implemented idea. So actually helping other people how to code is the best implemented idea I have. The proof is in the numbers, right? Like a lot of my other projects are fine, but for whatever reason, I just come back to teaching other people how to code, and that's been the most effective for me. Maybe I just have some way of speaking with you guys that helps, and that's it. But I have plenty of other ideas. I do test things fairly often, and sometimes I let them hang for a while. Sometimes I don't even go back to them because I just lose interest. That happens too. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. There's so many ideas out there. It's just crazy. And that's why I think it's so important for you guys to learn how to code, is because then you can test and implement these ideas faster than you've ever wanted to. Sure, I've made e-commerce sites for other people. I've made other projects for other people, other training sites and all this stuff. I've definitely done those things from time to time. But I always come back to this because it's just so much more meaningful. I really like connecting with other people who are learning how to code because I still feel that way. Still learning. I learn every day. Okay. Okay. So next question. RV, Manuel, thank you so much for that question. RV saying, how can I be more productive with Django? Like, how can I start transitioning from function-based views to class-based views? Well, we have a lot of tutorials on that specifically of using class-based views. I think function-based views are really good for beginners because it's fairly straightforward on how to implement them. But the transition, just do it. Just start doing it. Start failing. You guys, coding, a big part of it is messing up constantly. I do it all the time still. All the time. Like, it's a big part of what I do. There's nothing wrong with that. The best NBA basketball players in the world shoot under 50%. They miss most of the time. Like, think about that. That's the same thing with our job. So you gotta try things out. You gotta take the shot and just do it. Read the documentation, ask a bunch of questions, and you'll get it. I mean, there's also a lot of tutorials and comments and Stack Overflow posts about function-based views and the things that you might have about them in transitioning to class-based views. Pennywise, do you plan on using Vue.js in future courses? Do you have a preference on front-end frameworks? I think I mentioned I really like Angular. I think Angular is really awesome. Vue.js is cool, and so is React. Maybe I'll do them eventually. It's really hard to say because I have a lot of other interests in Python-related stuff right now. There's just so much stuff that can be covered in all these things. And honestly, there's definitely other really high-quality instructors out there that cover Vue.js and React.js that I could recommend to you if you guys have those questions. Super Substitute, you're welcome so much. Thank you for commenting. Blessed One, PHP or Node.js or Django. I'm assuming you're responding to all three of those things. I think Django Channels is the one that's super interesting. So Django Channels version 2 just came out, and I believe it uses async IO to work with it, or at least it works very similar to that. So it's asynchronous Django code as well as working with WebSockets and all that stuff. I'm really excited about that in particular. So you probably know my feelings on PHP. Node.js, I don't use it enough to make a really solid judgment between Node.js and Django. Node.js has its place and it's dominated very well. I know that Instagram used Node.js for notifications, or at least they used to at one point, and then they used Django for their web framework. So they use Node.js and Django together. So there is a way to do it. Sometimes that's the marriage that you want. Alex C. Oh, cool. You're telling me how to pronounce Sergey. Sergey. So when I said Sempera, that's actually Sergey or Sergia. Well, I know Sergey. So Sergey, thank you. Much appreciated. Wow. Kieran Benoy, do you think Django 2.0 channels are awesome? Yes, I do. I think it's going to be huge. Specifically Django channels 2, not necessarily Django 2, but Django channels 2. They're a little different. Or channels is actually the name of it now. A2S miners, I have learned many stuff from you for free. Thank you, sir. Lots of love from India. Lots of love from California in America, or the United States. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Happy to help when I can. All right. Rishi Pandy. Hey, Justin, are you planning on a course on Electron API and Django integration for building desktop applications? Yeah, probably eventually using Electron. I think that Ionic is actually going to probably make a desktop one in the near future. That's my guess. And if it does, I'd probably end up using that because I've heard not so great things with Electron. So if you wanted to do that now with the content that I currently have out there, all you need to do is build a REST API using Django and Django REST framework, and then find some front-end framework to integrate with that REST API. So Electron is really going to then connect through the internet to your Django backend that's on like Heroku or AWS. That's what you would do. That's what I would do if I were going to build one of those things right now. Because you're not going to really install Django like as a package inside of an Electron app. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but you're probably not going to do that. Yeah, I don't think you would. I mean, maybe. I mean, at some point it gets to being like, well, maybe you should write it in the language that's built for that desktop app then, you know. And also, why build desktop apps? There's so much stuff that you can do in mobile that perhaps that's the better route to go. I don't know. I've thought about this a lot, actually. Okay, Ronaldo, +1 for Electron and Django. Okay, cool. So maybe we've got some interest. You guys let me know if you want some more. Hi, Big Saspio from Russia. Hey, Big Saspio, what's up? Nice to meet you, man. Thanks for your... Hi from Russia for your tutorials. Great work. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. What do I think about blockchain in 2018? Well, it's definitely a transformative technology and methodology. I think that it's going to continue to change how we do things. And in the crypto space, we're looking at potentially a huge change, but these big governments do not want that to change. Big organizations in general don't want to underpin what's happening with the financial industry, and blockchain is threatening that. That's actually pretty cool. It's really interesting too. I think the next few years we're going to see a lot of stuff about it. I'd love to get into that more sometime, but I only have a couple more minutes. So blockchain is thanks for the question, Verat. A2S miners, blockchain is trending. How to implement in Django? I don't think you would use blockchain with Django necessarily. Maybe there's a way to do it. I don't know why you would, because blockchain itself is like a distributed system. You're not, Django's more of a centralized system, so they're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. You could probably have Django somehow work with the blockchain. It's probably a way. I just don't know yet. Haven't learned enough about it, honestly. It's one of the many things I still need to learn, is why I'm more interested in more Python stuff and blockchain and those sort of technologies than front-end frameworks right now. That's what also Angular is out there. I have done a bunch of stuff with Angular, and I think that's really good because, I don't know, it's just really clean. Okay. Okay, so now, next one. I'm just going to start to try and rattle these things off because I really need to get going. Okay, so do I think Django 2.0 is production ready? Yes, I do think it's production ready. They wouldn't release it if it wasn't. Honestly, that's what I think, at least. Can you make a video on how to integrate CodeMirror in Django? Haven't used CodeMirror before. Tweet me the link or something, and I'll have to look at it again later. At Justin Mitchell with 1L. That's my Twitter. Will you do a course on Django Mezzanine? I think that's a CMS framework. No, I probably won't, to be honest. I don't think it's that interesting. I'm sure a lot of people use it. I personally don't think it's that interesting. If you're going to use a CMS, you might as well use WordPress. If you're not going to use a CMS and you want Django, build the CMS yourself in Django. It's not that hard to do. Check out our blog project. I think that's Try Django 1.9. Cool. Sweet. It's going to be helpful for you guys. I'm sorry. I realize that it could be helpful if I build a course for it. I'm sure somebody has it out there. But really, I don't see a huge benefit to using Django Mezzanine myself. I'm really willing and able to be convinced on that because I haven't used it enough to make a really good thing, but that's what I think. Maxim, hi from Moscow. What's up from California? Newport Beach specifically. Take a break, Sensei. Thanks, Ronaldo. Just a casual Q? Yes, absolutely. 100% a casual Q&A. Like most people, I know you technically, but if you're comfortable, tell us more about you as a person. What do you want to know as a person? This might have to be something like for next time, right? Like just bring questions for next time or the next time you join me on one of these live things. What do you want to know? I mean, I could talk about all sorts of things. I actually started as an entrepreneur, and that's what I identify with more. And being an entrepreneur, I find the solution, and that made me a coder or an engineer. And I think that's what happens with entrepreneurs is if they really believe in something and they want to make it happen, they find a way. I think you will too. If you want to make something happen, you'll find a way. That's how I became a coder. Cool. Happy to answer questions with anything. Okay, so Ronaldo, enjoyed the session. Thank you so much. Best wishes to you as well. Mike, glad I can help you with your question. Kieran Benoit, I want to know if we can work with Django and JS together. I just answered that, so yes, you absolutely can. Can't go into much more detail there. Asked you for production. What time do you choose past like Heroku or AWS and DigitalOcean? If you want to get things deployed quickly and deploy often, Heroku is awesome. I've thought about switching from Heroku several times, but then something breaks, something new comes out, and I'm like, hey, I really like Heroku for that reason. Yes, it comes at a cost. It's definitely more expensive than try and go the other way from a dollar perspective, but time-wise, it's way less expensive. So that's why I like Heroku a lot. So can you put on the light between AI fields? What's the difference between ML, image processing, data analysis, data analytics, and how to get started with it? Machine learning is machine learning. So image processing doesn't necessarily have to have machine learning to use image processing. It can, but it might not. Image processing, most likely, you're going to use some sort of trained model to process the image further, but you can process the image with other open source packages. Data analysis, data analytics. Those can go hand in hand, right? So like if you do data analysis, you're probably going to have to use data analytics for it, right? Like those seem to go hand in hand. And you don't have to use machine learning to do those things. You can use something like pandas, which isn't really machine learning, to understand how these things work. So you just run basic statistics on it. Or you can use something like scikit-learn or a deep learning library like TensorFlow or Keras or PyTorch. There's a lot of them. So that's a very basic understanding of it. What I would do if I was getting started with machine learning, I would definitely check out scikit-learn. That's a really cool introduction to machine learning in a way that's not so technical that it's daunting. Like TensorFlow, learning TensorFlow, it's daunting. It is. It just is. And same with Keras. There's just a lot to it. It's a lot of there's some good resources out there. Next time, ask me about it again, and I'll go into it some more. Can you please teach us about implementing some multiple user models using abstract or base user with permissions and access control? I actually show you how to use base abstract user with the custom user model on YouTube. So go to joincfe.com/YouTube, our YouTube channel. Look for that custom user model there, somewhere in there. Already answered that question. Thoughts on Django and machine learning integration? Yeah, so there's probably a really good chance what you would actually end up doing is building a machine learning model and using some cloud service to actually execute that model, and then using Django to interact with that API. Not actually doing it within Django. Django, usually the systems that you use to set up Django don't have the RAM or the processing power to actually run and train these machine learning models. So you'd have to use another service. And you might end up using Django to interact with the API to do things, but it starts to get a little bit more complicated. So using like Google's machine engine, I think it's called, or machine learning cloud, or whatever it's called, with Django is probably what you would end up doing, or AWS's version of that. But it's cool. How to impress your boss? That's a funny question. Ask a ton of questions about them, about what they do, about what they know. If you could sit down and interview your boss like they interviewed you for an hour every week, that would probably eventually get you to know them really, really well, and then you might be able to impress them. Good luck trying to get that sort of interviewing, though. I think asking a lot of questions, getting their advice on things, and not bugging them. I think the bugging part is something you want to avoid. So you definitely want to be very clear. Hey, I don't want to bug you, but I'm hoping to ask you some questions for 20 minutes. Does now work? Can we do it sometime in the future? And sit down and ask questions, much like what we're doing here. How do I finish studying in order to work as a UI UX designer in the overall web industry? I'm in semester 2, second semester. How do you work in those industries? Maybe learn more about them and hit up people that work in there. Maybe try and find friends, courses. Courses might be a good thing, like go and learn from an instructor and then pick their brain. And courses that don't have a ton of students often are really, really good, because then you can pick their brain. Even if the course isn't that good, you can still ask the instructor a lot of questions, because they might be really willing and able to help you with that stuff. Maybe not. It's hard to say. Or joining like sort of a mastermind or a networking group that meets up for these things. All right, I'm going to answer just a few more questions. I have a static website on AWS S3. How can I link that with Django on a separate place? That's a very technical question. I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to do with that static website, so sorry, I can't answer that. I'm having trouble coming up with, David Mars, having trouble coming up with ideas for a product or service using Django and Python. What would you do if you were in this situation? What type of applications do you specialize in? David, solve somebody else's problem if you don't have one, right? Ask your friends for problems that they have that might be able to be automated through technology. Then try and solve it. Even if it's a really small thing, just keep doing that, and then eventually you'll start finding some of these problems that you can solve that are a little bit bigger, that might be beyond the scope of just your friends or family. That's what I would do. Okay. Thanks for the question, David. Victor asks how to learn useful things and not waste time. What's your schedule? How do you learn something? How do you know what's good to learn, maybe? That's a little bit tougher. I think you should follow your effort. So if you put effort into something, just stick with it and just start to grow that effort, even if it's a waste of time with somebody else. And I think that's true with making pizza as it is with writing code. So just follow your effort. And that's what I do. My schedule is all over the place. So I don't really have a specific one to that. Any major changes in Django 2.0? Not exactly, but I did cover a lot of them on joincfe.com/blog. Look for the Django 2.0 stuff. It's definitely on there, that I cover it in somewhat detail, as well as some other comments on there as well. Well, I do have video on TDD. What's TDD? Can you let me know? What do you think about the J hipster stack? I don't think much of it. I haven't used it much. Agreed. A TDD project would be great. TDD, I don't know what that is. Please let me know. It looks like I probably need to research whatever TDD is. I think I probably do. Cool. I'm almost caught up. Oh, and I haven't. If I haven't heard it enough, you rock. If you haven't heard it enough, you rock. Thank you for all your teaching and training you do, John. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the comment. I love doing this. It's great. It's seriously everything. Like sometimes I'm like, I don't really feel like teaching. I'm going to do this for a while. And what happens is I learn a bunch of stuff while I do this, and then I come back and I teach about it. That's what happens. It's happened for years, literally years. It's awesome. Teaching is so much fun. Richard Brito, greeting teacher from Venezuela. Thanks for your support. Hey, Richard, thank you so much for your support, and thank you from Newport Beach, California. Let's see. Catherine, can you make tutorials about the inner workings of Django, covering meta classes by going through each file by file, Django library, and how can we contribute to Django? Ooh, you want to get really nitty gritty. On joincfe.com/projects, the core section, we cover like Django Unleashed. That does go into some of the nitty gritty, not so much about how to contribute. To contribute, I think you would just do a pull request on GitHub. I'm pretty sure that's how you do it, and then they would just, give you an answer. Already answered some of that. Cool, I'm almost there. So how do I hack the internet to watch live sports? Sorry, can't answer that question for you. Let's see, Jordan, any way to show a live feed from an IP cam on Django? Yes, there definitely is a way. I think AWS has some services for live streaming through a Django website, much like I'm doing right now on YouTube. I've been working on a dynamic dropdown from once, and not able to find. Sorry, if you're working on a dynamic dropdown in Django, just look up the jQuery library and maybe ask some questions on Stack Overflow. Don't be afraid to ask questions on Stack Overflow, even if people give you hate about it. I mean, it's good to ask questions. I will always say that. Kieran, you're welcome for answering your question. Thanks so much, blah, blah, blah. Would you consider doing a series on React? I already answered that. Where's TryDjango 2.0? Working on TryDjango 2.0. I promise that will come out in the near future, hopefully. The very last question I'm going to answer that was asked 2 minutes ago by Farhan. Any tips on info for someone who is starting freelancing offline or online? So I would say that what you should do if you want to start freelancing is prove a ton of value first. Right, so if you don't have a portfolio of websites that are live that people can actually visit, they don't have to be on a different domain, but they should be different projects. So I would do that first, build something like that, and then hit up people that are looking to get things done and maybe do it for free. I think there's nothing wrong with working for free to prove value. And then maybe if you say, hey, I'll work for free, if at the end of it, if you really, really like it and you want to hire me, I would really appreciate that. And here's how much it's going to be per month to make sure that this thing's maintained, because you still need to maintain stuff. So that's what I would do to start. I would absolutely consider reaching out to companies who maybe they have a job posting for Django and tell them your story. Say, hey, be upfront about it and say, I want to learn. I want to get in this field. I want to be the best at it that I can be. And I see that you guys are looking for this person. I am not that person yet, but I want to be. So I would love to intern for you guys and do as much as I possibly can for free until I prove value to you and you're ready to hire me. If you're ready to hire me now, great. I will learn and ask a ton of questions and just have that beginner's mindset as much as you can. What I just said is exactly what I would do if I was moving into another field or if I went to go work for a company, which I don't know if I ever could, but that's what I would end up doing. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. This was awesome. Like it's a lot. Like it's a lot to talk for an hour plus about these things, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope that you did too. I will absolutely do more of these things, so make sure you tweet me at Justin Mitchell on Twitter. Mitchell with one L, so JustinMitchel on Twitter with the hashtag at AskCFE. And hope to see you in the next one. Thanks so much, guys. See you next time.